we need also to adopt more programmatic approaches that enable the transition to go from downstream and also upstreams. And in this case, PDBs, public development banks, can play a critical role in this regard by combining long-term financing, policy dialogue, technical assistance to close the gap between the different and supporting the different actors. To respond to this demand rising from members, the IDFC facilities are focusing activities on this for these last years, providing some thematic training, but also supporting banks on developing their own strategies and policies. And we have two members here that are embarked on the pilot phase that we have on this, supported by a philanthropic, Grovald. The program is called PEPS. It's for empowering on sustainable energy those banks. So the idea of today is to discuss where we are on this, and also having two partners, AIA, with which we signed a strategic partner this year, the International Energy Agency, but also the Global Solar Council, which is an important actor on energy, to discuss today where we are and what will be the next achievement. So I will give first the floor to our colleagues from the banks. So we have here today. We have Atika Benmaid from IFD. She's the deputy head of the division of climate and nature. We have also Olympus from the DBSA, the head of the climate finance and nature. I think that is also now, yes, biodiversity. And last but not the least, we have also Manfred Kopper from the CABEI, the Central American Bank for Investment, who's the head of the sustainability department. And from the other side, we have Sonia Dunlap from the GSC and Luca from the AIA. So my first question is for you, colleagues from IDFC, is to understand what you are doing this last year to on energy sector to support your clients, and we'll start with IFD. For this last year, if you can tell us about, you have not all the day, of course, to tell us all these things, but 5 minutes to tell us where you are and what will be your prospect for the next years. Thank you.
Thank you very much for organizing this event, Mustafa. And I think it's even more timely that it's the moment where we are discussing even more the Dubai Consensus about tripling renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency and also transitioning away from fossil fuels. So this year is particularly timely to talk about energy. So as AFD, as a group, with the supports that we're having on the energy sector, I want to stress our two key ambitions. It's on one side, of course, improving access to electricity, and on the other side, deploying low carbon energy at every level. And I insist on the fact that we have these two ambitions because we should not only think about clean energy, but how the access to energy that is still missing in a lot of areas should comprise and should take into account climate challenges. Every year, we have 2 billion euros dedicated to the energy sectors in terms of finance for the AFD group, being an AFD or Proparco or a subsidiary in charge of the private sector. We are present on the whole value chain, and I wanted to talk about a few examples. Oh, I can leave it on the floor, it's fine. Upstream, we are working at the public policy level, backing public policies, trying to ensure that the governance framework and the public policies of all the countries that we are supporting have enough incentives for the development of clean energy. And it goes through policy dialogue tools, loans, but not only, as you said, Mustafa, it's not only financing, it's also TA and capacity building. An example of last year on that regard is related to the Indonesian JETP, where we have provided a result-based loan together with Asian Development Bank and KfW in order to improve the regulatory framework in Indonesia to better integrate renewable energy. Another aspect, stream of work is the capacity building. And here I can quote a clear example to illustrate. When I was based in Jordan, I was in charge of the energy portfolio. And one of the challenge was, after developing the capacities in terms of renewable energy, we had to train the teams in order to better integrate this renewable energy in the energy mix, especially as when it's not it's not connected to storage. We have a more complicated way to manage it inside the energy mix of Jordan. And it was something that was doing progressively. And it was really one challenge because the renewable energy capacities were installed, but not fully used because of that lack of capacity from NEPCO, which is the energy utility. But the situation was improving with the support of the donors community in terms of capacity building. When we're talking about capacity building, it's about jobs also and developing green jobs. We have supported the development of a vocational training program in Tunisia to ensure that the capacities in terms of operation and maintenance of renewable energy, but also installations, are present in the country. It's not only about installation, it's to have the whole ecosystem to take care of this capacity that are installed. Another aspect is to facilitate, of course, the projects from the origination to facilitation. There is the classical feasibility study, so I won't go on that, but a thing that is really important in improving the energy mix of the country is having enough knowledge for an energy planning on the long term. And it's something we have done in South Africa, for instance, a modeling GEM. And I think it was really interesting also for the JETP decisions that the government has taken to elaborate several scenarios and to look at the macroeconomic consequences and the fiscal consequences of the decisions that we're taking in transition away progressively from coal. And it's really important for the decision makers to have this information, to know what is feasible and on which duration. Another aspect also is to facilitate on the long run the integration of the private sector. And in order to do so, sometimes we have to kickstart renewable energy. That's what happened in Egypt, where I was based before, where initially all renewable energy projects were financed by public finance, by PDBs. And then slowly, now that the frameworks were put in place, the contractual framework, but also everything that was needed in terms of giving the right incentives by the Egyptian government, the private sector started to enter, and the renewable energy capacities were not financed anymore by the public sector. And this transition is really important because if we want to mobilize more financing, and the PDBs won't be enough. So it's our role as a PDB to try to kickstart, to create the right framework that gives enough visibility and trust to the private sector, and including national banks in Egypt in that case. Another role, how we are also trying to reach the whole ecosystem, is sometimes we have provided, and again, another example in Egypt, credit lines to banks that were focusing on climate finance, including renewable energy, building their capacities for them to be able to finance smaller scale projects than what we would be able to finance as an international PDB, which will allow to avail even more domestic finance. So on top of the private finance, there is the topic of mobilizing domestic finance for this agenda. And I won't be long enough. I know I talked a lot. I will say just one or two few words. And on innovative schemes, the role also of the TA is to look at how much innovation is feasible. And I know that most of us have been looking at green hydrogen, for instance, and looking at in which condition is it possible to implement them in our countries, how is it bankable or not. And another innovative tool, it's not only technical innovation that we need, but also financial innovation. And I want to mention a work we're doing on insurance on energy projects in Costa Rica and Mozambique, where we are working with insurance to cover the volatility of the productivity of energy productivity for hydropower plants. And because this production is even more volatile with climate change. So this also can enter into the whole business model, making a project even more bankable on the long term. So that's, in a nutshell, a few examples. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Atika, for this very insightful points. I turn now to Olympus, and I know that your country, South Africa, is facing a very important challenge in terms of energy. It's something that's it's in the DNA of DBSA. The energy is really something on which you focus, and you just set up recently the just transition framework. I mean the integrated just transition investment framework. Can you tell us about what is the strategy? I mean how the BSA is taking this very important role given by the government on implementing and developing the energy strategy, and what will be your role and how will you see it? Can you tell us about where you are and what are the challenges looking forward?
Thank you very much, Mustafa, and thanks for the invitation. I think before I get there, I just wanted to talk about another initiative that we've been working together with the IDFC. Maybe as a form of an update as well. You know, we worked together earlier on a concept around mini grids, a very rough concept at that stage, but it has since really developed into a more robust concept where we've collaborated with our national utility, ESCOM, and got funding from AFD to do some preliminary feasibility. Also got interest from another entity, Catalytic Finance, who have put in, you know, funds alongside the DBSA to look at advancing the initiative. So as we stand now, we're just working on contractual issues to be able to, in earnest, you know, start with, I guess, the implementation of a bankable feasibility around mini grids, which, you know, as much as access would be, comparatively speaking, within the continent, you know, South Africa would be relatively, I guess, advanced from an access point of view. But, you know, we still have areas where, you know, mini grids are applicable, and, you know, we are looking at really advancing that. But our real long-term game is to see how we take the learnings from there and expand and replicate in the region. And there's already conversations with, you know, the GCF on how we look at expanding that program. So I thought it's important to just mention where we are, especially as is something that we started together with the IDFC facility. And we appreciate that support as always. But, you know, going back to, you know, our role within the, you know, the JET implementation plan, I guess you'd be aware that there's a number of portfolios that would cover. Where we have been quite active, I think I'll talk about two portfolios. The one is really on the municipal side, how to support municipalities. So there is, from a governance structure, a secretariat that has been put in place and leading institutions that have been, you know, I guess, nominated to lead that work. And the DBSA is leading that work. So there's currently a lot of engagement with different partners around how to, you know, how to operationalize that. One of the key work that is being done is identify a pipeline of projects. Alongside that, also look at potential sources of financing and how to put that together with various stakeholders. So that work is currently, you know, ongoing and progressing quite well, I should say, you know, alongside the PMU in the presidency. I'm sure you also know that one of the portfolios is around the EV side of things, more specifically the public transport side. The DBSA is leading that, you know, a piece of work. You know, how we really got to be positioned for that was because we already, with the support of the GEF, working on a program with a number of metropolitan municipalities on, you know, putting together, you know, a program to introduce electric buses and municipalities. So we're currently working with one of the three main municipalities in the country. But now the scope has increased quite a bit because it's now looking at public transport broadly. So it will go beyond buses to cover even minibus taxis, It will also even start moving into rail. It will even start to cover even work that is being done around BRT systems. So that work is ongoing. The DBSA is an important part of the secretariat that is in place alongside one of our sister DFIs, the Industrial Development Corporation. The other work that forms part of it is the battery management systems. So we are bringing various players in that regard. So that work is currently ongoing. Of course, an important piece has been that when this was initially conceptualized, it was actually pre-COVID. And, the balance sheet of municipalities at that point was, I would guess, relatively healthy, but post, COVID, there's been quite serious challenges in terms of, whether the balance sheets of those municipalities can really support the program. So one of the major pieces of work we are doing is to look at a number of partners that could help us take the program forward. One of the things we are really looking at is also, going right down to talking to even OEMs on the bus side to see whether there's possibility of partnering where we could maybe look at either getting, these vehicles at cost or just as part of, the program with the view that, they could potentially, be part of the implementation side. So that's one of the things that we are looking at. But in the main, we are looking at, other sources of financing that could be able to supplement the challenged balance sheet of municipalities to see how we take this forward. But with regard to how we finance the program beyond pilot, there's already again discussions with the GCF to look at how we would replicate that. But beyond just that is, the municipalities have got plans in place already to see how they start transitioning their procurement around buses, moving from, diesel in the main to electric mobility, but not just electric mobility, other sources of or alternative mobility that could be looked at. So that's, I don't want to take too long, but, that's that we've been playing within the JET implementation plan. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Olympus. Now I turn on to Manfred. Manfred, you are working at KBE, which is a bank, a regional bank, working with different countries, having the different size, the different, I would say, different maturity and needs. How do you work as bank of this area, this region? Can you tell us about the challenges and how you deal with that in terms of energy? I understand the energy is very important for you as a sector for the developments of the region.
So it's working?
Yes, very well.
So yeah, KBE has a focus specifically on Central America, the Dominican Republic, Panama, and Belize. And yes, all of these countries have different necessities, perspectives related to energy. From the bank, we have developed an institutional strategy from 2025 to 2029, a sustainability strategy aligned to that institutional strategy. And we're also working on an energy and climate action plan for 2025-2029 through technical assistance. And the main idea is to understand the priorities of each country, to understand the priorities of Central America as a region, and to see in which of those projects and in which of those priorities the bank can contribute to create bankable projects so we can solve and create solutions that can contribute to the challenge related to energy. So in some cases, if you use their NDCs, you can look for projects that can contribute through energy on the projects that we're looking for. But in many cases, they don't have like the vision or the goals or the projects identified as priorities. So we have to begin working with them to understand which of those projects can be bankable, which of those projects can be regional, and which of those projects they can work together. Because in many cases, they want to work together, but they don't know how. So we have to work with both countries or many other countries to understand the regional priorities and to create solutions that they can implement in their countries. So at the end, the bank is promoting regional energy interconnection and policy alignment. And the policy alignment is very important for us because at the end, we are a very small region and we have to end talking at the same language, all of us. If we begin creating different solutions for each country, the problem is that we're going to end talking in different languages and it's going to be almost impossible to work, for example, on a grid interconnection. And the idea is to have solutions, policies that can work together through the whole countries that we're serving.
Thank you very much, Manfred. So now we are going to turn to our, I mean, the IDFC is club of bank, but working with other institutions and partnering with other, because we think, and this is the DNA of Facility, to create ecosystem for our banks and establishing partnership with different institutions. And one of them is EIA. So maybe turn it on you to Luca. Can you tell us about how you can help as you used to work with governments? And how do you work with governments to try to reach this very important and very crucial objective of the 2030 objective of increasing the energy parts on renewable? How could you help on this?
Perfect. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much. If I can put, yeah, I prepared, if you allow me, one slide, just to maybe take a step back to, if you can, yeah, perfect. If you can put it in the full screen mode. But basically, first of all, I would like to thank you very much, Mustafa, also for the invitation to the IA for this and to the IFC to collaborate. But the idea is to show you the level of investment that at the beginning of the session we're talking, this 3.3 trillion US dollars that are in the energy sector today. Perfect, thank you very much. As you can see, the level of global investment has increased. This is all energy sector, both clean and fossil based. But if we click through, please, we would see that the first component, which is the fossil base, this is relatively constant. And actually, if you look at the 2019 level, so the COVID pandemic year, you would see that in the levels of today, in 2025, we have not, the fossil fuels investment have not yet recovered from 2019 levels. Instead, what has increased quite a lot, if we click through, please, is the second component, which is the low carbon energy. And this is, at the moment, is 2.2 trillion that is set to go to clean energy in 2025. If we click again, we can show you how this would evolve, would need to evolve by 2035, precisely to reach the goals of the COP28 UAE consensus. And as you can see, the level of investment in clean energy sources, especially in renewables, especially in energy efficiency, has to increase by a lot. And in total, the level of investment needs to increase by 70% compared to today's level. So this is a massive challenge. And if we look also under the hood of this picture, we would see, as you were saying at the very beginning, a very uneven redistribution of this investment, because only less than 20% of the global clean energy investment that we see on the screen, only 20% goes to clean energy in emerging market and developing economies. Outside China, but these countries represent 2/3 of the world population. So this is really imbalanced, and this is exactly where PDBs can make a difference, and they are indispensable because they can provide, in certain cases, of course, local currency lending, They have proximity to policymakers, as we heard also before, and they can also take early stages risks. However, what we see is that there are some structural barriers, including limited project preparation capacity in certain cases, insufficient tools to assess clean energy risks, and so technical assistance can help in these cases. So the issues at stake, I think it's everyone knows that the cost of capital is very important, especially for emerging market and developing economies. We host the cost of capital observatories, and we see that for clean energy projects, at least 2 to 3 times is the cost of financing of clean energy in emerging market and developing economies compared to advanced economies. So this is, again, another main challenges is, but there are a lot of gaps that PDBs can fill on this. For instance, they can help with project screening, they can do appraisal methodologies, and also can help with blend and partner structures. And so technical assistance can really have a catalytic impact. So we see that there are 3 main ways in which technical assistance can really have a transformative effect from PDBs. One is the institutional strengthening. So integrating, embedding Paris Agreement methodologies, cost of capital analysis, and risk screening methodologies within the PDBs. Project preparation, we heard before from IFD as well. It's very important to have pipeline creations, but this starts with data. So we really need to have a lot of good data. And so training PDBs also with these diagnostics can really help. And the third one is structuring and mobilization tools. So having well-designed blended structures that could have, for instance, subordinated debt or first loss equity will be relatively crucial. At the moment, we have a mobilization strategy that goes from every dollar PDBs mobilize 60 cents. To get to that level, we need to have a mobilization strategy that gets to 3 to 7 US dollars per public dollar finance mobilized. So maybe I'll get to your question, what we can do and what the IEA recommends. So for us, it's very important. So we work, I can give an example of industry. We see that heavy industry, for instance, it's going to be central to decarbonization as well. We need to mobilize more than 500 billion these decades for net zero steel and cement, for instance, in our net zero scenario, and around 3/4 of these in emerging markets and developing economies. We know that technical assistance and concessional support to this sector remain very limited. So we need to really accelerate. There are key instruments that we see, for instance, targeted support for first-of-a-kind industrial projects. It's very important, and also feasibility work alongside concessional finance and also guarantees. So it's a number of different instruments. So the IEA work is done, for instance, through the breakthrough agenda. We develop, we complement the work of PDBs. We develop, for instance, we advance the development of common standards. We provide the mine signals initiatives and also early demonstration efforts. So just to conclude very quickly, what we think it's needed to move forward for technical assistance to be effective, it must embed within the PDB's core operation this aspect that I was saying before. So Paris-aligned risk framework, building the project pipelines, but also scale up mobilization in a sustainable ways. The PDBs are uniquely placed, as you were saying, this goes beyond money in itself. It's not only capital mobilization, but PDBs are really uniquely placed to pair finance with technical assistance. And so this is really important. And so we need more concessional capital, greater use of guarantees and risk sharing tools. And from the IEA support, we can provide support by providing data, policy diagnostic, but also cost of capital analysis that could help PDB's institutional capacity. And also we have done this in cooperation with the IDFC. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luca, for that. I heard about the importance of the private sector and the industries on these prospects. So I think that I'm turning to Leo, who replaced Sonia. Just maybe to tell us that what we heard is that the banks are ready. They establish strategies. They have technical assistance. They have money in form of loans. The majority is in the form of the loans. There are also policies in the countries that are in favor of developing feed-in tariffs and so on. And what is the problem now with the private sector? Because you are representing the private sector, and do you feel that they are showing off enough this time and to invest? And what do you see as challenges? Why the transition is not going fast? Why the private sector is not involved at this stage? And how you can help as Global Solar Council to with your members, how we can do to help on this transition?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. First of all, so the Global Solar Council, as Mustafa already said, we represent the private sector from the whole value chain, development to all the way to recycling. We're a member-led platform, and we have different groups where we think about the main challenges that we have identified as the solar industry. Obviously, the one on finance is absolutely key. It's potentially the main challenge that we have for solar to be deployed across the world. And with that little introduction, I would like to thank my IEA colleague here with his cost of capital analysis, which was great help for this, because of course the cost of capital is it's an incredible problem for the industry, especially in the emerging markets. I think the example of Africa is very well known. 60% of the best solar resources, and yet 3% of the global clean energy investment. This is something that is absolutely not sustainable, and we know very well that development can pair also with the energy transition. So what GSC does in that regard, first of all, what's important to say is that GSC, I mean, the solar industry is already $500 million industry. So there is already a lot of money. This is the fastest growing source of electricity in the world at the moment, and in terms of finance as well. But indeed, as Mustafa said, the cost of capital, and there is an imbalance, a gap in financing the emerging market, and this is what GSC is taking a look at. And we have several initiatives to try to palliate this. First of all, we have an informal group, which is the International Solar Finance Working Group. It's where the industry meets the PDBs and the commercial banking system. Because I think there is a real gap of understanding between these two worlds, and there is not enough bridges into this. And Mustafa was part of it as well. So this group is to lower down the cost of capital. And I think my colleagues explained it very well. We talk about regulatory frameworks, we talk about creating private investment with PDBs, but there is one topic that is dear to GSC and that we can see ramping up, is the question of credit rating agencies. Unfortunately, there was some analysis. Often the discussion, they circle around, okay, the cost of capital is high, okay, but we need to ask why and how do we cope with this, right? Because indeed, there is a part of risk that is perceived, for sure, and real risk. But what we can see that the risks perceived are proportionally demeasured towards what the risks are. If you take the risk in Africa, if you take the failure rate of solar projects, it can be less than some in eastern part of Europe. And yet, the eastern part of Europe's cost of capital is 2 or 3 times less high than in Africa. So there is an imbalance here. And the credit rating agencies, they contribute to this with the methodologies that they employ. So the Columbia Sustainable Center on Investment has shown this. And I think this is something that we can collectively tackle as well on trying to change these methodologies, because it's an action that can simplify investment. Of course, the private sector's role is to invest, and we're ready to. We have the money as well. And truthfully, given the geopolitical consideration and the constraint on the finance space, on the public finance as well on countries, unfortunately, public finance is becoming less and less available. And this is not sustainable. I think there is a work to be done, of course, to educate the bankers, the private bankers, how to invest and take more risks. because that's what their money is for. And as you said, you all do a fantastic job to create enabling regulatory framework, technical assistance, and capacity building. So there is no reason why they shouldn't invest in these emerging markets. And that's what we're trying to push at GST as well, as the private sector representative, because the solar industry is ready to invest as well. In terms of action, this was the first part. And we also publish reports, Africa Market Outlook, that takes a look at the global trends in Africa, how solar PV is deployed. And this is a business-led report, let's say, to try to incentivize the private sector to invest as well, because we also do pedagogy for our own members as well. Sometimes they don't consider going to emerging market because it's not deemed safe. Well, that's what we're trying to do as well. So it really, we try to go both ways on this one. There is also a part of capacity building as well that we do, but not directly with the governments so far. We will be able to do it at some point when we'll have the capacity. But the way we see things is that the private sector's voice is very important in the local space, in terms of local lobbies. So we work with the Solar Trade Association locally. South Africa, for example, is a leading association that we work with, and we try to empower them to try to advocate for their good regulatory enabling framework, because GSC cannot be everywhere, and also the Solar Trade Association that are local are the real experts of their own country. So that's another way, although it's slightly indirect, to contribute to the finance problem. And finally, I really like what Atika said about innovation as well. We're looking at innovating financing models. I know that we're collaborating with APRI, which is the African think tank, on how to use the central bank, who could then lend to DBSA, who could then lend to the private developers. So all this kind of financial structuring, as my colleague from IEA was saying, is very, very important. And of course, innovation. I think there is something that should be done as well that we're looking at GSC in terms of insurance. There is a lot of money in insurance, and this has been successful in the US already. So we could try to take this mechanism and replicate it, especially in Southeast Asia. So this is some of the work axis of GSCs and the leads that we have. Aside from, just to finish, aside from the high cost of capital, one part is the demand. In the countries, the demand is sometimes not big enough to try to create the whole industry and incentivize private investment. So this is something we're trying to work on as well, to building either big pipelines of projects. North Africa is an extremely good example of this, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, but mostly as well, less in this, let's say, Western-led development schemes, of big projects, but more also with rooftop solar. Because rooftop solar is actually very affordable at the moment. And this is a way you can see communities that scrap their finance to get solar plus storage. And this is a way to bypass potential longer-term actions to provide electricity right at the moment. So I think these movements are also needed. So these are some of the leads. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Leo. Maybe one thing is lacking also in the sector is that we don't have very big companies on the renewable as we have. For example, we don't have companies at the size of Total or Mobile on renewable energy. Do you see that we will have the emergence of these major banks, major companies on renewable in the future? Do you see the emergence near on capable by the size, the money and the technical capacity to take very high risk as they did in the past?
Yeah. To be honest, yeah, you raised that point, and indeed, it's a very good point. First of all, what needs to be said is that the main industry and the leaders development manufacturing are in China, and this is something that there is a real decorrelation between China and the rest of the world, in the sense that we, as a solar representative here at COP, we probably have 7 members that are here from Chinese company. So there is, first of all, a lack of a presence of China in these kind of institutional spaces. And in terms of development, I think if you create the systems for them to advance, I don't see why they should, but that requires the help of PDBs, enabling regulatory frameworks in the proper market, that the private sector takes more risks. And I don't see why. One last condition would be for the government to render the fossil fuel industry less profitable as well. because we see that Total was recently condemned for greenwashing, and they still invest a very little portion of their portfolio. And I think fossil fuel are still too profitable, and that also is a barrier to prevent for actors, pure players, that are somewhat for now still too little to grow beyond. Yes, because it takes a long time for these pure players to attain the scale, and Total could be one of them, but with the right incentives.
Thank you very much, Lou. We have just 10 minutes left for the. So maybe I can leave the floor for a question if there are if you want to ask question in the public. I don't know if there are anyone who has a pressing question or remarks or comments. I see none. Yeah, please.
Hello. Great. Hi, I'm Joscha Rosenbusch. I'm working with the German Development Cooperation Agency, GIZ, in the program for energy efficiency in buildings that is implemented together with the French AFD. So we are looking into energy efficiency in buildings. And if I could maybe get a quick round from the panel on the challenges that you see on financing energy efficiency in buildings and how you tackle it in your respective portfolios. Because, I mean, we know that renewables are much more attractive, also maybe more interesting when it comes to financing. Energy efficiency is usually more difficult to find the sweet spot. We are working on it on our end, but I would like to maybe get a little bit of more ideas on how we could address this.
Thank you very much. Of course, the cheapest energy is the energy that we don't use. And maybe you can say a few words about that, yes? Who wants to start? Yeah.
I can start. I can start, and thank you for referring to AFD and the PIP Cool and the project that we are happy to implement together. On that, I want to share an experience that I had when I was both in Jordan and Egypt, and then we worked on a lot of energy projects, and we wanted to work on energy efficiency. One thing is it in the regulatory framework of the country that every new building or all building needs to look at energy efficiency? It was the case, not perfectly, but it was the case. But then there is the question of enforcement, and that was a big issue. Another challenge that we had is, of course, it's cheap not to consume energy, but in countries where the price of energy is not yet covering the whole cost of the production of energy, sometimes the cost of energy efficiency projects are not actually covered by the energy efficiency on the long term, or it's too much a long term. So I think it's also something on the financial on the setup of the projects, and here we can also, to improve the bankability of this kind of projects, look at the innovative financing. Maybe guarantees can help, maybe blending finance. I mean, what is PIPCool is doing with the blending finance, for instance, and with the GCF, it helps a lot, and the EU in some areas, depending on the countries. And actually, we have mobilized PIPMed in Egypt on a few projects. So I think that are the challenges that I faced when I was in country offices in terms of energy efficiency. A last thing also, it's like when we talk about energy efficiency, I know you talked about buildings, but something that we don't always think about, it's not only infrastructure. In cities, actually, energy efficiency can be related to urban planning, to the 5-minute cities and all that. I mean, we all know the concept. That's where you have also the energy efficiency. And maybe one last challenge, because even though I was covering the energy sector, I'm actually a water person more. And even in my heart, I'm more a water person. And in the countries where I was, I remember that every time we were talking about energy efficiency, it was energy people talking about how do we do that in buildings, how do we do that in industry sometimes, but they were not covering the whole sectors. And I was in country where water was scarce, and actually the water sector was the first consumer of energy in the countries. And that's also something that has to go beyond the energy people. So with the prices of energy that increased, that gave the incentive to look at, for instance, better pumps, variable speed pumps. It's more expensive, but it's more energy efficient. It's one of the examples. So I think it's also trying to mainstream the energy efficiency in the sectors and giving the right incentives, being regulatory and enforcement, but also financial incentives in that regard.
Just a quick one, Mustafa. So we have a program more focused on SMEs. The genesis of it was really to look at the capability for a number of SMEs. What came out of that was a very promising outcome, but the challenge was really taking advantage of the opportunities that were identified. So we put together a program. Just a few months ago, we got approval from the JEF. So we will be starting with that program quite soon in South Africa. So we're really looking forward to seeing a lot of work happening in that regard. Thank you.
Maybe Manfred, you was a word about energy efficiency.
So in the Central America case, it will depend on each country, right? I will begin to understand the policy framework, to understand if they have the correct incentives, also to see if there are projects that they have developed in, for example, Costa Rica. They have very interesting projects that can be scaled up to the different countries in all over Central America. But at the end is which incentives are going to promote correctly to the private sector so they can implement good decisions related to building new buildings and old buildings. So they can really make the transition to energy efficiency, to new products, to innovation, so they can really implement it. So at the beginning, I will say policy framework, also to understand projects that already have been implemented, but in a real small scale, so to see if we can make those bigger. And in many cases, the incentives are specifically to implement the product for the energy efficiency, but we don't have the information to understand if that building is business as usual or if it's really contributing and in how much to our target for the country. So to create good information to the private sector and the public sector to develop good incentives, it's really important because at the end, we have good information, for example, related to buildings from the Green Building Council, but regularly it's from the US, Europe. But when you try to understand information, how much water a Costa Rican use in Costa Rica per person, per square meter, we don't have that kind of information. So when you're trying to create, okay, so business as usual in Central America, give me the numbers and then we can create incentives. And that information, we are lacking a bit to create incentives that will move the public and the private sector to promote this in a good incentive way, because at the end you want to understand how much you're contributing and to understand if you are really hitting the KPIs of the public sector, the private sector, and at the end to the wallet of the private sector if it's really moving the needle or not. So that's how I think for Central America will have to go.
Thank you very much, Manfred. Yeah, energy efficiency is a sector, complicated sector, because we, as you said, we need a lot of information. It's also a small sector with a small investment. You have to reach targeted small actors, and it's quite difficult. Maybe you can tell us about what is the importance of energy efficiency in achieving the energy transition in the climate for the climate benefits.
Absolutely. I can tell you the experience from the IEA analysis on the COP28 goals. Of course, we've analyzed the potential impacts on emissions that achieving in full of the doubling and tripling goals, so tripling renewable energy capacity and doubling energy efficiency by 2030 would have. And energy efficiency, doubling energy efficiency improvement rates is the one that the lever that would really have the highest impact. However, as we were saying, this is a complex sector, and energy efficiency means different things for different countries. So, for instance, in advanced economies, it's mostly related to accelerating electrification. In countries where it's this hot as we are experiencing right now, it means implementing, for instance, more air conditioning or more energy efficiency measures in buildings as well. For sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, that would mean clean cooking solutions. And so it's true that we need a lot of data for this. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. We really need to go country by country, understand the progress that we could do. What we can tell right now is that unfortunately, the goal of tripling renewables is more or less on track. We are, with the latest analysis that we are at 2.6 by 2030. So it's more or less within reach, the 3 times. But
Thanks
for
to China.
yeah, thanks to China, but also many other countries. But yeah, mostly, of course, thanks to China. But then energy efficiency, instead, we are very, very far off. We are at the moment at 2% annual rate of improvements, and we need to reach 4%. And this is, it's going to be very challenging. And all the challenges we heard about how to finance this, we really need to find solutions quickly to overcome them to get to that goal. It's not that simple.
Thank you very much, Luca. I think that we can stop with that, saying that energy efficiency is another frontier that we should, on which we should work hard and together with the renewable energy, but it's not enough. So we have to do more on this. So thank you very much. We don't have any more time for other questions, but thank you to be here, and thank you to the panel. I think you can make them a big applause for their intervention.
Thank you very much.
The picture of